Thank you, Thunderfoot, for proving my point. Let me read the description of my Raspberry video to you. This video is a response to Thunderfoot, not to any particular one video, but to the overall attitude displayed by him lately. Since it appears proper debate is not possible with him anymore, see his reaction to Coughlin 616 and D-Land and Cole, among others, we are now responding to Thunderfoot in a manner more in tune with his own way of debating. Funny, because when the idea to blow raspberries came about, it was out of frustration. We figured, since you refused to address valid criticism, we may as well be blowing raspberries. The raspberry video was deliberately not attached as a video response to any of your videos, while others, much more worthy of being addressed, were. Yet you chose to cherry-pick our raspberry video and again refused to address the valid points, and then you even have the audacity to claim that raspberries are the best we can come up with. Tad bit dishonest, aren't you? It is also quite insolent to directly connect us to the death threat you claim to have received from Dahua Films. Our video was about your lack of response to valid criticism since long before your issues with Dahua Films. I'm not even going to get into the issue. I think others have done so sufficiently on multiple occasions, and you chose to ignore them as well. I'm surprised they haven't blown raspberries at you yet. Some of your fans have asked me why I accuse you of straw-manning, quote mining, ad hominem attacks, moving goalposts, and all-out lying, and I promised them a video response with the answers. Unlike you, I will link all sources in the video description, so people can actually go look it up themselves. Part 1. Thunderfoot vs. Pogo Bat. In your reply to An Open Letter to Educators, you say this.
Dan, I have a reputation for being a particularly humorless bastard when it comes to people bad-mouthing science, knowledge, and education.
Nice one, Thunderfoot. He isn't bad-mouthing science, knowledge, and education. He has an issue with the way educational institutions work.
Institutional education has been a massive force for good for hundreds of years, and in no way, shape, or form am I trying to deride what it has done for society.
Then you ask the following question.
Why do you think it is, that so few times that society looked to the college dropout for visionary insight as to ways we can make things better in the future, say for instance with the education system?
You quote mine a bit more in order to make college dropouts look bad. So let me list a few dropouts that did have an impact on society. James Francis Burns, U.S. Representative, U.S. Senator, Supreme Court Justice, U.S. Secretary of State, South Carolina Governor. At the age of 14, he left St. Patrick's Catholic School to apprentice in a law office. Never attended a college or law school. Barry Goldwater, U.S. Senator and presidential candidate. He dropped out of the University of Arizona after 1 year to take over the family department store. John Major, British Prime Minister, high school dropout. Walter Nash, Prime Minister of New Zealand, dropped out of high school. Alfred E. Smith, Governor of New York and presidential candidate, left school at the age of 14 to help his family after his father died. He would later joke that he received his FFM degree from the Fulton Fish Market in New York City. Harry Truman, U.S. President, never went to college. William Faulkner, Nobel and Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist, dropped out of high school after his second year, also later attended but dropped out of the University of Mississippi. Louise Hay, one of the best-selling authors in history and founder of Hay House. When compared with other female authors, statements were made such as, they did not change the spiritual landscape of America and several of its Western allies. They were not pregnant at 15, and they did not lack high school diplomas. Louise Hay did. Doris Lessing, novelist, at the age of 14, she chose to end her formal schooling. She then worked as a nanny, telephone operator, office worker, stenographer, and journalist. Her first novel was published when she was 31. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2007. Bobby Fischer, Grand Master chess player, a high school dropout. James M. Cox, newspaper publisher, three-term governor of Ohio, presidential nominee in 1920, founded Cox Enterprises, a high school dropout. Arthur Ernest Morgan, flood control engineer, book author, college president, director of the Tennessee Valley Authority, left high school after 3 years, later attended the University of Colorado for 6 weeks. Thomas Edison, inventor of the phonograph, light bulb, and many other inventions. He quit formal schooling after his teacher called him addled, was homeschooled by his mother. You continue strawmanning by comparing his gestures to those of Glenn Beck, whom you then compare to the voice of London from the movie V for Vendetta.
Pogo Bat does bear a stunning resemblance in demeanour to Glenn Beck.
Is it capitalism that has failed here? Is it the greedy, evil corporations? Is it because there's no cap and trade, no health care, not enough social justice? Is it because of the Republicans? Or is it because of them Democrats? Or is it the fact that just like some of our new money doesn't say now, God is no longer trusted in America?
Who in turn bears a stunning resemblance to the caricature of propaganda in the Voice of London, in the totalitarian state in V for Vendetta.
Did you like that? USA, ulcered sphincter of our Surrogate. I mean, what else can you say? It was a country that had everything, absolutely everything. And now, 20 years later, is what? The world's biggest leper colony. Why? Godlessness. Let me say that again. Godlessness. It wasn't the war they started. It wasn't the plague they created. It was judgment. No one escapes their past. No one escapes judgment. You think he's not up there? You think he's not watching over this country? How else can you explain it? He tested us, but we came through. We did what we had to do. Islington, Enfield, I was there, I saw it all. Immigrants, Muslims, homosexuals, terrorists, disease-ridden degenerates. They had to go. Strength through unity. Unity through faith. I'm a God-fearing Englishman, and I'm goddamn proud of it.
That's quite enough of that, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a bad start.
So instead of presenting proper arguments why university education in its current form is still important, you decide to indirectly compare Pogo Bat to the spokesperson of a totalitarian religious fundamentalist regime. Bravo! While I do not necessarily agree with Pogo Bat on all of his claims, and could probably refute some of them myself, you instead chose the route of completely misrepresenting his character. Why didn't you address the issue of his claim that he found better information online than in college? Why didn't you bother to point out that a lot of online sources can be misleading and of lesser quality? That without proper guidance from an educational institution, you may not be able to distinguish between proper sources and outdated material or even false information. No, you had to take the route of straw manning and quote mining instead. Part 2. Thunderfoot versus Islam. In your video, Is Islam a Hate Crime?, you say,
Bollocks. If your faith is causing people to fly planes into buildings, then it needs to be scrutinized in a public forum.
Thunderfoot, this was not a religiously motivated attack. It was a political one. Then you move on to this.
If it's an Islamic country, then the Sharia is very clear. Apostasy is dealt with the death penalty.
Thank you, that's all I want to hear.
And yes, if that is a central tenet of your religion, then the very practice of your religion is a hate crime in a modern first world country.
So you now decide that this one person speaks for all of Islam. His reply clearly stated that it applied to Muslimic, non-secular countries where law states that abandoning Islam requires the death penalty. You, however, refer to it as breaking the law just moments before that clip. While I greatly disagree with fundamentalist religious laws, and am a firm supporter of secular governments, I refuse to allow you to misrepresent the majority of Muslims by appointing this person their overall spokesman, especially when he's being quote-mined. In your video, you continue to post snippets of hate speech from religious fundamentalists as if they are the only Muslims out there. When you actually take the time to Google the words Muslim protest against terrorism and violence, you will find plenty of results where you will see moderate Muslims protesting against terrorism and violence. Are you too lazy lately to do your research? Or why do you continue to agree with people, as seen on your blog TV show, that claim moderate Muslims silently condone violence and terrorism? Part 3. Thunderf00t versus the Catholic Church. In your video, you state,
but none less than the Pope, who Catholic dogma says communicates directly with God, and that when he does so, he is infallible.
Strange as this may seem to you, Thunderf00t, even the Catholic Church does not consider the Pope infallible. In order to be considered infallible, the Pope has to speak ex cathedra, which happened last in 1950, when Pope Pius XII defined the Assumption of Mary as being an article of faith for Roman Catholics. Sadly enough, most Catholics themselves do not know this little fact, but it still remains a fact. The Pope is not considered infallible at all times. While I completely agree with your stance on the Pope's warped thoughts on the use of condoms, the covering up for child-abusing priests, and very many more flaws within the Catholic Church, I have to yet again criticize your lack of research when you present the Pope as infallible by default according to the Catholic Church, because it's simply untrue. Part 4. Thunderf00t versus Islam, Round 2.
This time the Muslims are threatening the creators of South Park.
Oh, so it's the Muslims, as in all Muslims? Did you perhaps fail to mention that the ones threatening the creators of South Park were a minor group of nutcases, much comparable to the Burn a Quran idiot group in Florida? You once again project the threats and actions of a small group onto the entirety of Islam in a gross overgeneralization. You continue by pointing out acts of fundamentalists and conclude that this is the reason.
Bravo on a prime example of why your religion has no place in the first world.
You then suggest that all Muslims to this day try to enforce the Sharia, while the Christian world has moved on from barbaric laws. You move on to suggest...
You want to live in the first world? You want to live in the age of reason and taste its sweetmeats? That's really not a problem. But like every other religion, you can check your Iron Age baggage at the door.
Guess what, Thunderf00t? Many of them did. Where I live, very many moderate Muslims have done just that. They live an everyday normal life alongside other atheists like me, alongside Christians, Hindus, and other religions. They get an education like my children do. They take on professions like we all do. They contribute to society. They work. They pay taxes. And the majority of them will not wrap a homemade bomb around their waist to blow up the next tube station. Why not, if, as you claim, their religion demands? Because they are educated. They don't suffer from poverty. They don't have to fear a fundamentalist regime punishing them for voicing their opinions. While religious fundamentalism may play a part in terrorism, it is never the sole source. Environmental and political problems are the initial trigger that drives people into the arms of religious fundamentalism.
You know, like that Van Gogh guy you killed. Yeah, stabbing and shooting an unarmed man. Yeah, that's a showcase of the virtues of Islam. And yet, of course, the criticism of the moderate Muslims was conspicuous only by its absence, and that really does speak volumes of their attitude to these acts.
I will ignore the rest of your ramblings in this video, the sleeping giant reference and so on, since it's just further propagandistic ramblings, not aimed at a group of fundamentalists, but at Muslims as a whole, even the most moderate amongst them. And you actually wonder why some of them feel offended? My 15 minutes are almost up, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up for this part of the video. But I will be back with part 2, and if you're still interested, feel free to check it out. It's gonna be linked in the description box.